Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And let's start here. So after you became a manager, what is something that came as a surprise or was unexpected?
I would say the first surprise was the incredible amount of time management that is required, from the administrative work to all the meetings to appointments, one-on-ones with your team, and then factoring in your own daily work. That it really eats up a lot of your day. So then, you're having to learn how to balance what meetings are important to be in, how much time do you dedicate individually to each team member and collectively as a group. So really just the having to learn how better time management skills, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Makes complete sense to me. It's a big shift. Kind of like having kids.
Right,
So,
right.
okay, so are there any certain personality types that are more difficult to manage that you have found to be more difficult to manage?
Um, it's a little bit of a cross for me. I find that people who are extremely needy, the type that have to literally be told, how do I do this or how do I do this, which isn't necessarily bad, but you've given them a project, you want them to go out and make it their own. You've set those parameters of what a good example looks like. Here are your boundaries, and they struggle with that. And they literally come back and say, well, could you just tell me what to do and then I'll do it. That's been difficult for me because obviously that factors again into time management, and then you want your people to grow and be independent, and you don't want to have to micromanage all the time. So that one's hard. And then I think people who avoid the team, avoiders, I guess, that come off cold and off-putting. I have recently discovered that can just affect the team mentality overall. And other people are afraid to speak up in a team meeting because, that type of personality immediately shoots them down or is negative. And that can be really defeating as a team.
Yeah, definitely agree. So, and this is something where I know that you're somewhat still new to management, so you may not have as many like examples in your toolkit here. But so what have you learned about managing the different personality types? And like, are there any things that you have found that you're able to kind of modify what you do to try to bring out the best, and then to try to help, how to deal with different types of personalities?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is making sure that you can help people be have self-actualization, help them understand that while they may not be good in one area, they can succeed in another. And that's okay. If you're not creative, that's okay, but let's work on the skill sets and your content and other areas that you could be more successful in, and that maybe somebody else on the team is more successful in that area, and that's okay. You don't have to be perfect at everything. And then what I've recently been trying to make sure, as a new supervisor, that I do is making sure that I don't impose what I would do in that role onto them. Again, giving them a good example, giving them boundaries, and then they come back with that work product, making sure that I don't pick it apart because that's not how I would do it. But making sure instead that I am giving them proper guidance. And then I have one of our leaders at the company has a good saying about, you coach your people up and you get out of their way, and you try not to micromanage, and you let them grow and figure things out. And so that's something I've been trying to challenge myself with lately, of giving them the right tools, coaching them up, giving them good examples and boundaries, and letting them know that they have those decision rights to go out and do something really great.
Just so you know, I'm really proud of you because I feel like you have adapted to that pretty quickly. I think it took me longer than it took you, because you weren't there when I did my first few years of management, but I think it took me a little bit longer to not be so prescriptive as far as how you done. So
well, I had a good teacher in you. So
okay, so do you or your organization use personality or strength tests to place people in certain positions or roles? So this is something that I'm not sure if they've brought it up at all. Years ago, we did some different coaching things, like Tiffany and I were in those, where they had different, coaching and personality tests and things that we all went through to help us. But I don't know if you've been exposed to that at all.
I have not been exposed. I do, if they're doing it, I wish they would be more vocal to the leadership or especially the new supervisors. That's going back to the first question. That's something that's been difficult too, is just feeling like you've been in this new management role and you're kind of just left to your whim, especially in my case where I have a supervisor in a completely different country. So we have different time zones. So he can't always, coach and mentor me. So if they are doing it, it would be something that I wish they would broadcast better. And I do think it's beneficial to kind of get an idea of where people excel better, and you have an understanding of that before they kind of roll into your team, or you can help foster something.
Mhm.
You know that
Yeah,
they're
no,
really
yeah, I think that we can talk offline after, but yeah, I definitely think that there's some value in that, and we're already doing some of that with my management class, and it just kind of reminded me of, oh yeah, this was really a great thing that we did at one point in time, but I'm not sure if maybe HR or somebody could initiate something else. So yeah, it'd be great. Okay, so what leads employees to higher levels of organizational commitment?
I think recognition of hard work. I think when you have that recognition that you're doing a good job, and not so much just in the form of promotion, but hey, you did a great job on this project, or so giving them the feedback that maybe somebody else that they worked with in a different department let you know that they're succeeding. Communication is always important. Just getting that overall sense that you're valued and you're heard. I think a lot of people want to be heard, and when they don't feel heard, it's defeating, and they say, well, what's the point if no one's listening to me? Why should I try?
Yeah, very well said. This is kind of along the same line. What leads to employee engagement?
I think a lot of those same similar traits, just communication, transparency is a big one, that a lot of people at my company right now are really emphasizing, making sure that they understand what is this new, they're rolling out a new vision, but nobody seems to know what that means and what that looks like. And so I think the more you can be transparent in your own team and then overall as a company, I think you're going to get people plugged in more to what you're trying to achieve and what you hope to achieve. But when you go kind of silent, you just get a bunch of chaos and confusion, I think.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna dual purpose here, just because you for me, always looking for opportunities to help. But the other thing I would say, and I think you're already doing it, but just to keep it at the forefront, would be including them in the decision making, and including them sort of in the here's our situation, let's brainstorm together, and letting them feel like they really have skin in the game, I think also helps. helps a lot too. And I think you're already doing it. I just wanted to point that out. So okay, so what do you think contributes toward employee disengagement?
For me, I recently went through this in a former department, and it was, excessive workload of feeling like you're the only one doing everything. And it's just piling and piling up. And then just, and above that, poor leadership, lack of direction, lack of vision, not feeling like you trust that leadership because the conversations are ever changing, or you find out from somebody else in a completely different department what your own department's doing, which is really just disheartening. So I think if you don't have to agree with your management all the time, but if you don't trust the people that are there to lead the department, then you're not going to be very successful. You're going to be unhappy most of all, and miserable and unfulfilled in your role. But then long term, you're just not going to be satisfied with that.
Yep. You don't know this, but you're hitting on all these things that we've been learning in class. You're doing great.
I'm a good teacher. So
what are the best ways for an organization to show employees that they have organizational support, like they are valued by the organization?
As a person, I think, again, just having those conversations with all of your employees, whether it results in some sort of interpersonal, town hall type thing, or one of the things they're doing where I work is the president is, he has a lunch with Casey session. And so you can sign up and you can sit for an hour and a half with him and talk about things that you like about the company, areas of improvement, and he listens and he takes that in. And I think just, again, connecting with your people and making sure that they understand that if you have a problem, you can go to those people in management, that you're not going to be turned away, and that they value your opinion. They don't want to just send out a mass bureaucratic email and say, this is what we're doing, and you just have to do it. They genuinely want to feel, do you connect with that? And how can we be successful? Or if we're not being successful, what can we do? So I think the more that they can engage with the people in the weeds and make them feel like they're just not a worker bee getting a paycheck, I think is something that all organizations should try to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely better examples of that. And we had a great example, of course, with Casey. So he's awesome.
Yeah.
How does your organization use job satisfaction surveys?
Again, another area since I'm new at that, but I personally have not really ever participated in one other than like a review with my boss at the end of the year. But I don't know as a whole that they're really sending out anything that to get immediate feedback from how they feel like, here's an organizational change. How do you feel that that's working? Or we've transitioned to new departments or new structure. How do you feel about that? I haven't seen anything, at least at my level. And I think the more you can get feedback from your people, I think the more successful you're going to be.
This isn't part of the interview, but I thought I would just insert that this, especially since you've developed that relationship with Leslie recently, and because there are so many organizational changes, I definitely think it would be totally within your, rights or whatever to have a conversation with her and suggest, hey, maybe you guys thought about doing this type of stuff. Because the more I'm learning in my management class, there's a lot of those types of things I don't think that we utilized a whole lot. And I feel like that was a disservice to the company and to the employees. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
You can bring it up. It's really up to them to take the baton from there if they want to or not, but you can at least
but sometimes it takes, raising your hand and saying, hey, is this a good idea, before somebody will really think about it.
Yeah, maybe everybody's busy. So
yeah.
Okay, are there certain behaviors you have observed that you attribute to exceptionally high or low job satisfaction? I'm gonna say that again. So are there certain behaviors you have observed that you attribute to exceptionally high or low job satisfaction? I guess that might be behaviors by your boss or peers or the company as a whole, just in general. Are there certain behaviors that make you feel less satisfied or more?
I think to feel highly satisfied in your job, again, it's the mentality of that your boss trusts you, that they say, hey, here's a project, you go, I trust you to get it done. They don't have to necessarily, obviously you'll get requests for status updates and things like that. So that's a little bit different, but just not being micromanaged, that they know if they tell you to do something, they trust that you're going to do it, that you know how to escalate, you know how to raise your hand. And I think, again, when you feel like there's confidence from your boss in you, you're going to have that confidence. So I think that makes an employee be, I benefited from that. I had a good boss trusted me to make the right decisions and knew that if I didn't know what the decision was, that I would ask for help.
Yeah.
You can find, in my personal experience, you find a lot of job fulfillment in that, to just know that you're good at something and people recognize that. So I think on the flip side, low job satisfaction is, when you're micromanaged, when you don't feel like, or every little thing that you do is picked apart, or every little comment that you have when you're trying to be helpful is just shot down. You stop speaking up, and then you get frustrated, and then you don't feel heard, and it's not satisfying in any sense. And then you just feel like, well, what's the point? Because especially when you're in a position where you have that ability to speak, when you're in a management type role, and those above you don't really care what you have to say.
Yeah.
I don't know, to put it bluntly, they don't care, whether because they disagree with it or they just don't think it's something they want to learn or know how to do.
I think this is true of human nature in general. I would say, because the other thing I have right now is I'm not, as you know, working, but I still have teenagers and young adult children. And the same principles for me. And actually, one of my children just the other day said, I'm just so glad you didn't tell me that. I came up with this idea myself because it's so much more fulfilling to me that I wasn't being told to do it, that I was, so just giving people that room to come up with ideas and then supporting them and maybe
supporting it. Yeah. I think that's
Okay, well, I think we are just about done with time, but I am going to ask you this one last question just because I think this is a great one. What is something that you have learned from your experience as a manager that you would like all new managers to know? So like if you have somebody else who's never been a manager and now they're getting ready to be one, what is one thing that you would want to impart upon them?
Making sure, I think for me, what I have learned in my short time is just developing self-awareness. That you're clear in your communications to your team, to your own boss, not assuming that everybody understands exactly what you're saying or your own vision. And then more importantly, just, being humble and thankful for where you are and your team, and then ultimately just be excited and try to and people make mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. And then on a final note, the thing I've struggled with but learned the most is to not be afraid to ask for help.